Welcome to the autosportradio.com 2021 show. We are still at the Grant King Race Shops, thanks to Bill and Stephanie Throckmorton. And you can see behind me pictures on the wall, and you can see a different car over here that you haven't seen before. But if this world ever opens up and you get a chance to come around, you need to come and visit the Grant King shop. There's some great cars. They just brought a new one in today, actually. Something interesting to see, and some vintage equipment if you're interested in that. But if you get a chance, give them a call and tell them you'd like to come down and they can set it up for you. But today's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT Indycar Series, the SVRA, McGilvery's Pub and Speedway, and the VP Insurance. If you are looking for something, you got a race fan, an IndyCar fan that's looking for some little collectible, I got a place for you to go. The 500shop.com. It is a phenomenal collection of most anything you can think of you'd want. He's probably got it. So check out the 500shop.com and see what you don't want or don't need, but he's got it and you can get it. So check it out. And if you are like I am and have computer problems, I do almost daily, our computer doctor, Steve Freeze, is available. He is the A+ affordable computer doctor. Tell him what you need, what your problem is, and he can help you. And if need be, he can make a house call. His number is 317-328-0766. And everybody's favorite doctor's appointment, the dentist. Who else? But I highly recommend, and the highest rated dental practice in the state is the Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have a spectacular practice. Great people. You'll love them. Call, make an appointment. You need a dentist. This is a place to go. 317-846-6125. And if you are a vintage car fan or getting back into Trans Am, which is growing very rapidly, you need to go to the svra.com and subscribe to their Speed Tour magazine. It's a great magazine, covers everything they're doing. And even when they have an event, they'll tell you where the best place to go for dining and viewing, things to see. And while you're there, check the schedule tab and see where they're going to be next. And if it's anywhere nearby, I highly recommend that you go. It's a great organization, great cars, great drivers. Some of the guys and gals you saw as a kid, they're still driving, some of them. So svra.com is subscribe to Speed Tour magazine. You ever wondered why these guys and gals love driving open wheel, high speed cars like Indianapolis? Well, there's a way to find out. Take a ride yourself in the two-seater. The Indy Racing Experience is the home of the two-seater. You'll love it. To see what their dates are available and see what you can do, go to indyracingexperience.com. Find a date you can connect with them and get a ride. And in the promo box, put DK1, you get a 50% discount. Or you can call Shonda at the office. Their number is 317-243-7171. Is it time to reinsure your car, your house, or your commercial property? VP Insurance is the place to go. Mike Pardee will take care of you, and you'll probably find out you get better coverage for less money. Mike is located at 5004 West 16th Street here in Speedway. Give him a call. Tell him what you need. 317-248-0070. And if you have an interest in getting a vintage car, or you have one and need it restored, the Grant King shops can help you. And you also, this is a number to call to see if you can get in and get a tour. The number is 317-820-3959. Now, my guest today is I'm very happy to be able to capture her because I know she's very, very busy. She is the owner of what is now going to be the new team joining the Indianapolis 500, Paretta Autosport. And my guest today is Beth Paretta. Thanks for joining us today. It's a nice, I don't know how it is there, but it isn't worth a hoot in Indianapolis.
Pretty gray here too, but I'm happy to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, you have been kind of a leader for women getting into the automobile industry. How did you start? Where did you go to college? Where did you graduate?
Undergraduate, I went to Boston University, and grad school, I went to University of Vermont. And I wasn't in the automotive business. I don't come from an automotive family, but I have been car crazy since I was probably about 5 years old, reading car magazines. And I didn't necessarily think that was the obvious path for me. But eventually, when I found myself in automotive, it made perfect sense.
You've been in some very high-profile jobs with Volkswagen, with Chrysler. You've represented dealers. You've been in the marketing and management.
Yeah.
How has that been? Because as everybody knows, it's kind of an old saying, but automotive world is pretty much a male dominated, but
Right.
you seem to have moved in quickly and progressed it seemed quite rapidly.
I did actually, when I look back at it, I mean, after graduate school, I took a job selling cars at a dealership in Connecticut, where I'm from. And I started at a Honda dealer and then went to an Audi dealer. And that entire time it was only about 2 years. And from there, I got a job corporately with Volkswagen in finance for the Volkswagen credit division. So working with Volkswagen and Audi dealers and Bentley and Lamborghini dealers. And that process, that experience was invaluable about really learning how the automotive business works, kind of the real behind the scenes, the finance side of how dealerships make money, et cetera. And I will say that even though many people kind of get those jobs out of college, and I probably thrived a little bit more in it because I was also a car person, and because you're sitting across the table from somebody who's a car dealer, and it's, if not everybody in the automotive business is passionate about it, but for those of us who are, I think it carries us a little further in our career, because then it's just another way to connect with other executives or colleagues. And then it kind of progressed from there. So from Volkswagen Group, I then was hired by Aston Martin and worked for the North American division in operations. And from there went to Fiat Chrysler. But from the first job working at a dealership to being a director at Fiat Chrysler was only 8 years. I started selling cars in 2003 on the floor of a dealership. And in 2011, I was hired at Fiat Chrysler and reported directly to the then CEO of SRT and Motorsport, Ralph Gilles, interviewed by Sergio Marchionne and Ralph. And so that period from the dealership to moving out to Detroit for the job with FCA was only 8 years. And it's funny because when I was living it, you're in the middle of it, so you don't really think of it that way. But somebody asked me, and when I was sort of recounting the steps, I realized, oh my gosh, that was only 8 years. But that I honestly ascribed to being passionate about it, caring about it, working hard, reading car magazines, like I say, my whole life. And then also reading, Automotive News, which was the trade journal, and reading that week in and week out, so that when you interact with people, you can, instead of just talking about, your own little world, your own part of the automotive world, I had an appreciation for the broader view. And that allowed me to kind of network and get kind of further along on the ladder.
While you were making your way up the ladder in management and so forth, was racing in your mind? Did always connect a car, and they're selling cars, but these cars race. When did the racing part of it hit you? Is it something you wanted to achieve?
As an interest, it was always there, but in the corporate role, the closest I got in the beginning when I worked for Volkswagen Group is Audi, with at that time in ALMS, American Le Mans Series, was running like the R8 even before the TDI diesel version of that. But the R8 was the LMP1 prototype car at the time. And it's funny because the couple times a year that there would be a race in the area, like Lime Rock. So I was in the Northeast. I'm from the Northeast, and when I was working for Volkswagen Group, it was in the Northeast. So when the race would come around, we would maybe get some tickets, and the idea was, bring some dealers and host dealers. And so I would try to do that because it was my interest, and I could sit there and talk to the dealers or the guests about what was going on. I started helping some friends with their race teams, here and there, kind of being a gopher on a weekend. And then when I was at Aston Martin, it was kind of the same thing. Aston Martin had a team in American Le Mans Series. All of that was run out of the UK, though. It was ProDrive at the time. In fact, even like in American Le Mans Series, you may remember it was in the GT class, there was the Drayson Barwell team that was an American Le Mans Series. And then eventually, and then the GT Pro cars were running at Le Mans. We would have a race car in the US for like an appearance at a dealership. And it was funny but personally, on certain, on weekends, I would go to races because it was interesting to me, or I would plan vacations. I'd go to F1 races for vacation. And it was funny too, because I had coworkers that would sort of they would look at me puzzled, like, why would you go to a race on a weekend? And not realizing that there were some people that I worked with that, bless them, they could have worked anywhere. It wasn't, they weren't working at Aston Martin because they were passionate about cars. They were working there because it was a job, which I always found funny, because I'm thinking, if you think of these things as widgets, go work at a widget factory. We were so lucky to be able to be around this. And I think the passion for it, especially when you're customer facing, in fairness, if you're behind the scenes and you're in an accounting role, you don't have to have a banner on your wall behind you. But if you're customer facing, having that commonality, because your customers tend to be pretty passionate, at least about cars, and then maybe about racing. So same thing with Aston, sometimes, when the races would be in town, it was a time to bring customers to the track and kind of connect them with the excitement and be part of that family and that connection that you have of, rooting for your team. So but it was, again, nothing competition wise was in the US, because it was run out of the UK. So my first professional role in racing, proper professional role, happened to be when I joined FCA. And although they were courting me for the SRT marketing and operations role to really run the brand and as they were elevating SRT from a trim level to be a standalone brand, with that job came the responsibility of motorsport. And just in the interview and the chats back and forth with both Ralph Gilles and Sergio Marchioni, the fact that you can talk about racing and sort of speak to it and kind of know your stuff, then I then was able to kind of move into that role. What was a nice bonus is, in that responsibility with SRT, the part of the responsibility was managing the NASCAR program and the team, because this was as FCA was coming out of bankruptcy. And although Dodge had several teams the years leading up, as those contracts kind of were expiring, they weren't renewing them. So the last remaining team that was running with Dodge in NASCAR was Team Penske. And it just so happened that I already knew Roger and had a working relationship with him, because he is an Aston Martin dealer. So among every other brand you can think of. And at the time in the US, he had 3 Aston Martin dealerships. He now's down to 1, but at the time he had 3, Tyson's Corner, Virginia, which is Washington, DC, Scottsdale, Arizona, and San Diego. And he has sold 2 of them, but he still has Scottsdale. But the one in Washington, DC was one of the ones that I covered. And so that's how I originally got to know Roger, in that capacity. But then when it came time to join FCA and I was talking to them, they said, what do you know about NASCAR? And I said, I've not worked in NASCAR before, but I do know Roger Penske. And actually, I think I listed him as a reference for the job. So sure enough, join that role and then talk about an indoctrination to learn NASCAR. I remember my first, joined the company. And again, it was the brand of SRT, so the performance brand and racing. So it was kind of like 2 full-time jobs. Honestly, the brand was probably 70% and the racing's 30 or 65, 35. But what a gift to learn about NASCAR and the minutia of it and it was nice to actually have one team, because, my colleagues at Chevrolet or Ford or Toyota are managing multiple teams, which is kind of the normal way that it is. The fact that we only had one team, what was nice is I was able to work more closely with that one team and really kind of just learn sort of how they do things and what's required on a NASCAR, race weekend. And here we are. The rest is history.
And you probably realize what he did in NASCAR, he also does in Indycar, which is his success. Very organized, exactly. Very loyal. I mean, I know a number of his guys that have worked for him for 30 years.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, it's creating a good environment. It's empowering people to be able to make decisions and making sure they have the resource to do their job. And absolutely. And of course, because the shop is co-located, the NASCAR and IndyCar and sports car, when that's running too, they're co-located together. I saw all of that from the beginning. So even though I'd be down there on a NASCAR visit, obviously you'd be walking through the IndyCar shop as well. And then as time progressed, I just wound up having, close relationships with some people in IndyCar. And then I found myself in the IndyCar paddock. And what was interesting, of course, is So in the role of being a motorsport director for a major brand, as you can imagine, people start to know your name, especially drivers and their managers who are always looking for to get hired whenever there's a new program announced, right? You announce like the Viper program and everybody comes out of the woodwork because they want to be considered for that. Drivers, but also let's say other key members of the team. So as probably across those next 4 years, it just that network just grows and grows and grows.
When you were in the Viper event, did you ever meet a guy by the name of Russ Oasis?
No.
He ran Viper for a number of years. He owned radio stations. He happened to own one here in Brownsburg.
Oh, cool.
But
no.
Anyway, I saw in your bio that Auto Week magazine listed you as one of the secret people.
They did.
And also as a game changer. And, it's interesting reading your bio and how you've moved up very successfully. And it says, a lot for you, because companies that you work for don't just hire some nitwit walking down the street like me. They hire people that they can bring in that knows what this is all about. And I think that's hugely impressive.
I will say a few times in my career, and I think everybody can probably think of these moments in their life too. There's definitely times that people took a chance on me. I mean, they obviously saw something, but it wasn't like I wasn't necessarily maybe the obvious hire. But when you're given those opportunities, you kind of work your tail off to prove them right, that you were the one that might have been worth taking a chance on.
You were rumored or were putting together a team a couple of years ago called Grace.
Yep.
What happened? How did that not take off?
That was honestly just at the very end logistics. So a lot of support from the beginning. But 2016, just as a quick reminder, history lesson, was a really odd year. It was almost like a perfect storm. It was the 100th running. So there was a lot of extra pressure on it where everybody certainly wanted to win it because it was kind of an extra layer of kind of a cool feather in your cap. It's always cool to win the Indy 500, but the 100th running kind of had this extra cachet to it. But that particular year, going into 2016, so we announced in 15 the intention to try to run in 16. So then you're kind of, off to the races, as it were, proverbially, to put all the pieces together. And in 2016, there was a shortage of chassis. And so we were caught out with that ultimately at the last 11th hour because of things that had happened. Other teams were as well. There was a contraction within the series. You had teams that would normally run, 4 or 5 cars chose that year to only run 3. You had Ganassi that could have normally run an extra car. They were actually running at Le Mans because with the Ford GT program. So where they normally had the extra manpower, that they didn't have that year. So there were all these sort of unique things that were converging. Ultimately, so I did have an engine deal, had sponsorship, had the money, and we had a deal, and the terms of the deal changed. We were going to be running with a team, the way that like all Indy 500 only entries do, where you basically have a driver and money and a sponsor, and you bring it to a team, and you drop in and be like, their extra entry. That's exactly what we were to start, or what we were aiming to be to start. And we had a deal, and then the owner of that team changed the terms of that deal that were unfavorable as I saw them. And they were not as agreed. That was back in April before the 500. So it was actually, I always remember, it was right before Long Beach. We, as you know, everybody in racing, we mark time by race weekends because usually we know, right? We even ask people when their birthdays are. My birthday is always Petite Le Mans. So it's like such a racing geek thing to do, but we do it. So yeah, terms of the deal for the 500 in 2016 changed right before Long Beach, and that's about 7 weeks before the race. So then it's like, oh my gosh, wild goose chase to try to put it together. And ultimately had a chassis that the last chassis that was available, because again there was a shortage. The previous year some chassis had been, some Dallara chassis had been destroyed, tubbed, and not replaced. I called Dallara to see if we could buy a new one. They didn't have one ready to go. So we were definitely caught out. And I did have an opportunity with one last, because I had an engine, I had money, I had a driver, I had people, and we find this last chassis and it just wasn't race worthy. So it's those, they kind of making that difficult decision of like, you know what, we're going to sit it out because you're not going to put anybody in an unsafe situation. So that's where it was. And so after that, I took a little bit of time off because I had personal stuff, looking after my father who was sick at the time. And then probably about 6 months, a year later, I was right back at it on the educational side of what I was doing with Grace. I mean, and here I can see right behind me, got my Grace Autosport mug. So it's always, I've got little Grace things all around my house to always remind me of what matters. And the key is to inspire girls. And it was always supposed to be an outreach. Grace Autosport, even when I launched it, and it still exists, is more than a race team. It's really just a way to use racing because it's exciting to try to attract the attention of kids and have them see that there's, there are career paths for them in technology. Not that they're going to grow up and work for a race team, but if the racing piques their interest and then they decide to become a mechanical engineer and go work for Chevrolet, great, or a supplier, or go work for Borg Warner. My goodness, these kids can learn what Borg Warner is and what they make and decide that they're going to go work for a big automotive supplier. So it was the idea of really kind of lifting the veil on the cool stuff that happens on a race weekend and really connecting somebody's curiosity to where it can lead. Because, here I was reading car magazines as a kid, but my parents didn't necessarily see that in the same way to kind of say, hey, you know what, maybe she could become a mechanical engineer. Like it was never something suggested. And knowing how my brain works, I probably should have been a mechanical engineer.
Yeah, but you had engineers working for you and you were directing them. So that was.
Right, exactly. I just happen to hold the budget. So that's all. That just because it came with the job. It came with the job. Like, here's the job. Here's a big checkbook. And it's like, okay. And what do we pay for with this? We pay for the engineering. Yep.
And one of the things I was going to touch on is your wanting to mentor, getting females involved. And there's a number of them that have been in. In fact, the chief engineer for Indycar at Firestone is a female.
Kara Adams. Yep.
Yes, I've had her.
She's great.
She's very, very good. And of course, the leader of Firestone is
Lisa Boggs.
Young lady. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. What's so funny is IndyCar, I think, is the best about this. That there's so many women, and also who work for the series. Right. IndyCar is really, I'd say, progressive, and there's a lot of women that are behind the scenes. And I know that they take that picture every year at the 500, which is worth celebrating. But that's really it. I mean, we all tend to know each other too, because I mean, there's a lot, but there's not a ton. But what's really nice is, and you're seeing it a lot probably across the last 5 years, is with more of them coming into the sport, we do all know each other, we support each other, and we work shoulder to shoulder. And both Kara and Lisa, as you know, are very well respected.
Oh, yeah.
in their roles, which is lovely to see. And it's lovely that, I mean, I know Kara does a lot of stuff with schools, so we want to have more Karas in the paddock.
Well, there have been women in and out in the engineering department and so forth through the years. Yeah. And I know Roger and Indycar are looking at the diversity program and trying to make that work. Yeah. So naturally for you, now it was announced, and I assume, as Grace was to have been, that your team in May will be all female.
We're going to strive for that. And kind of even like Grace, as I said too in the beginning, the reality is there aren't enough women to make a full team yet. I mean, unless I stole some from other teams, which I can't do.
Oh, they would never do that. No.
I know. Could you imagine if Chip could let me have somebody and Andretti would let me have somebody? But yeah, so to start, it's definitely going to be co-ed. But the nice thing is being visible allows other women to kind of know, all right, if I work hard here, I can climb up to that. And we can also then take some junior engineers or junior mechanics in as not even interns, but junior level, as you would with any race team. I mean, you might just, they'll work shoulder to shoulder with an accomplished, seasoned veteran who, maybe a man, and then bring that skill set up. But that's what happens with every new team, in fairness. I mean, it's just going to be maybe a little obvious if you can see if it's, a woman that's come from another series, but every team has rookies and people that are maybe, junior level. You just don't necessarily know that when you're looking into the garage.
It's been interesting to watch how females have come in and worked with teams, and they're just like anybody else. I mean,
Absolutely.
the guys don't necessarily control their language because there's a woman next by. Not that they don't.
Nor should you.
No, it's just that's the world that you're in, and that's great. And I think that the ones that I've seen, the ones that I've known that have worked in, and the people I know they worked with said, no problem. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even when I was at Aston Martin, the role that I was in, all my coworkers in my role were men globally. So I traveled with a lot of them. Same thing. I mean, Volkswagen, it was a little bit mixed, but I'm certainly a stickler that if I'm meant to be treated equally and I'm traveling with a male colleague, I'm not expecting you to put my luggage in the rental car. I mean, we're equals. If I want to be equal, we're equal. I mean, certainly a lot of them are raised well and they're very kind to open the door, but it's not expected. Certainly, I think too, the women that we're talking about that are pursuing these sorts of pathways, like if you're going to work in top level professional sports like this, like racing, if we want to be treated equally, we're right. I'd say that the type of person that's attracted to that as a career or has that skill set, they tend not to be, they're not particularly dramatic. They're just getting it done. I mean, racing doesn't have time for a lot of the extras. You just kind of have to perform. You've got to be, it's the green flag, as we say, the green flag waits for no one. So you just get your work done and right. I mean, and if you aren't good at it, you're going to know quickly, and you don't last on a team.
right.
You don't climb those rungs unless you can deliver.
The thing that disturbs me is I think what you're doing is good. What you're doing to attract females into the sport. The sad part is with what we've got going on now, and this happens with military sponsorship as well. Yeah. You used to be able to go to schools, high schools, and talk to the kids and tell them what it's about and tell them what the military is about, tell them what racing right. and how females could fit in. You can't do that because the majority of schools are shut down.
Yes, that's true.
So it makes it a little difficult to do, but making enough attention, drawing attention, and I'm sure you will be in front of the cameras as much as possible to push the point of come join us. It's not a male anymore. If you know how to do it, come on and join us.
Exactly.
Now, the next thing up, of course, is you have hired or hiring one of my favorites. I think Simona Di Silvestro is a super lady. I've had her on the program, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah.
She's an outstanding driver. I've always felt she should have stayed here because I think she's capable of winning. She is a
absolutely
superb driver. How did you select her out of the other female drivers that are dotting the globe?
Well, I mean, that's exactly it, because you kind of look at who has the interest, who has the ability, and who has the right attitude and temperament. Because, and this even happened with Viper when we built the Viper factory team, when we were hiring drivers, when we were hiring the team partner to work with. When you have the luxury of starting with a clean sheet of paper, making sure that people's personalities and ambitions and intentions match up, that's also a key thing if you're lucky enough to have that. So when I started talking to Simona and realized that she had a similar approach to the women, a women's initiative for the women for women's sake is kind of not what either of us are interested in. We just want to get on and do the job at the highest level. And if you can be an example of hard work and having results, and allow the access so people can see the story and hear the story, the rest of it falls into place. Like, she's a racing driver who happens to be a woman. I was an automotive executive who happened to be a woman. I didn't get that job because I was a woman. I got that job despite the fact that I'm a woman. And right. And so, you don't get hired in those roles because somebody, just needs to have, it's not because you're a pretty face. You have to be able to do the job. And I fully agree that I wish Simona could have stayed. And I think you could say that for a lot of drivers too. I think the bouncing around, which they do by for circumstance, not because they want to, but the bouncing around is really a career killer. If you look at somebody like Scott Dixon and the success that he's had, look at the consistency of the people that are on his team and that he's been working with. And
Yep.
again, not to take away from Scott Dixon's talent, because you can drop him in anywhere and he's just so phenomenal. But you have that ability of to really gel as a team and learn how to communicate together, and that longevity is where you can really start to see wonderful results and championships. So I would love if we can figure out a way to do this full time and have Simona with us for a long period of time, because then we'll really see, you know, that talent and see that team functioning like a successful team should.
Is there any opportunity that you may run more than just the 500?
We may later in the season. There's an interest on all sides to do that, of course, because of course Simona would like to race whenever she can. But she is a factory driver for Porsche, and I think that's also a great statement of to show her merit, that to be a factory driver for Porsche in any of the series, how they want to deploy her. So she's been a full-time factory driver for 2019 and 2020, and that continues. So with that, if her schedule, as the schedule shakes out, I will say everything with COVID is a bit of a moving target, because even though we have dates on the calendar, you know that there's always a little bit of question mark now. But maybe later in the season, if there isn't a conflict, yeah, we would.
I think, she is a race driver, and she's
absolutely, and unflappable. I think that's what's nice, is there's her talent is there, but her demeanor is great as well. And you see that in the car.
Yes. And the other thing that I like about IndyCar, and it's to your advantage as well, obviously, is the paddock area is open.
Yeah.
You can get in, so you have the opportunity to come over and watch you people work. And of course, Simona will come out and talk and sign autographs and all that kind of thing. As I assume, if you're there, you will be available.
Absolutely. That's the accessibility. I mean, you see especially that, you see the parents with the young kids that are looking in the garage, and, those are the ones you walk right over to and say, do you have any questions? And let me explain it. Or if it's a safe time, come behind the rope and let's show you the car up close and explain what all the bits are. Because especially when you can captivate the imagination of, a kid, you're creating a fan for life. And in fairness, I hope that all the teams do that. I mean, some are better about that than others. And that's an investment in our collective future, right? We all want to create more fans. And that's one of the best ways to do it.
And no question about it. And I've mentioned this many times, that when they have autograph sessions, I don't collect autographs anymore. I've got most, but I go and watch. Yeah. I go and watch and I listen, and the fan will come up and get a driver's autograph that they've done before, and the driver will recognize them, and oh boy, they just go crazy.
That's the best, right?
Now
they might remember something else about them. Yeah.
And now you got them for a fan. You got
absolutely,
them. And that's what this sport is about. It's accessibility. The drivers, 99 out of 100 of them will stop and talk unless they're putting their hat on, in which case they won't. But
correct, exactly. You have to kind of understand the cadence of things and the timing, and you're not going to run up to them right as they're going to the grid. But any other time, I mean, to work in this business is an absolute luxury. This is a gift, and all of this is only possible because of the fans.
Oh, absolutely. And
they're the most important ingredient. And I know that, this past year with Roger Penske and their team owning the Speedway and owning the series, and honestly, as much as it was a difficult first year for them, how lucky and that timing worked out. I think what a wonderful steward for such a difficult year to have Roger and his team owning the series and the Speedway. But I know that it broke his heart to not have fans at the 500. That's obviously why they moved it, trying to buy as much time as they could. And because there's nothing like the 500, there's nothing like the Speedway when it's full.
That's right. And people are, and I've said this many times since Roger taken over, I got a personal guided tour by Mark Miles. One day I asked him, can I get a tour? Sure. So it turns out he's my guide. And I took Roger, I had Roger Ward Jr. with me, and we toured the place. Wow. Wait until people see this. It happened.
Right.
They're
I
going
know all of these improvements and no one's really been able to see them yet, right? The big screen on the back of the pagoda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So something of interest that I noted in your bio is you are on the board of directors for the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America.
Yes.
What's that like? And how does that process work? Who suggests people that should be brought into the Hall of Fame?
That's a great question. We actually have a board call tomorrow night to talk about this year's induction. Great group of people, and the people who run it, relies on a lot of volunteers, a lot of passionate people that keep it going. And it's a really beautiful Hall of Fame. It's at Daytona International Speedway. If you go for the tour of Daytona, it's actually included in the tour, but you can also just go and tour the Hall of Fame section. What's great about it too is it's all motorsports. So stock car, open wheel, motorcycle, power boats, everything. And what's lovely about that is when we do have the induction ceremony, we have an inductee from almost every category. It's a bit of a rotating class or rotating group of which categories are being inducted that year. But what that then does is it makes for a lovely mix of an evening, because usually the inductee will have their family or their teams or their longtime sponsors involved. And what's wonderful is when you see the dais of that year's class of inductees, you can see that amazing respect that every racer has for another racer in a completely different discipline. And in fairness, many of them have watched each other compete, on TV and such. So they're often meeting for the first time, and it's lovely to sort of see that interaction. And then at every induction, previous inductees are always then invited. Once you're inducted, you're always invited to every Hall of Fame event, of course, and that makes for a wonderful room of people. I mean, you could just sit there and have your head on a swivel and see these conversations between people that you never would have expected to see in person. But anybody can actually nominate somebody, and you could just literally write up a nomination and send it into the Hall of Fame, and then it gets reviewed. There's a Hall of Fame committee that then figures out sort of the worthiness of because sometimes it's just career, like you have to be, I think you have to be retired for a few years, 5 years before you're then first eligible. There are people that have been on the ballot several years and haven't gone in. There's other people that get on the ballot and they're inducted in the first time that they're on the ballot. Right. There are over 200 voting members. I'm actually not a voting member. Most of them are other inductees or, people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have. And it's certainly, it's quite prestigious. And it's funny because I think it's been growing. It's been around for, oh goodness, 30 years, but it's just growing and growing. And it's the induction ceremonies this year are going to be in September. We had to move them because normally they're in March in Florida, but we've again moved them later, hoping to be able to have people on site because it's just still a little too early. But we're hoping to also then have the ceremony streamed so that people can watch from home. And we're also updating the website because not everybody does have the ability to travel. But what a wonderful thing to have a really comprehensive website where you can learn about all of these sort of past, champions that you might not have ever heard of, or they just announced this year's class, and we have Janet Guthrie, Judy Stropus.
I know both of them.
Yeah, Fran Muncie, who is in the powerboat. So this is the first time the class will actually have 3 female inductees, which is crazy. I want to say Davey Allison. I don't have it in front of me who made the list this year, but some great inductees.
Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to work on Janet's crew when she came here. I worked for Rala Valstead at the time.
That's amazing.
Her co-driver was Dick Simon, who I worked for about 10 years afterwards.
Oh, that's fantastic. Talk about the real deal. Janet Guthrie, right?
She's quite a gal. Really
Amazing.
Enjoyed working with her. She was very nice. It took her a little bit to get used to, but once she did, off she went.
Right. Making history.
Yes. It's interesting, people that get involved in the sport and why and how and so forth and how it hooks you. I came here in Indianapolis for the first time live. I went to watch it on television. The first 2 years it was on television, fell asleep. And my friend said, that's not good enough. You got to come here. So I've been coming here Now I live here, but I've been coming here since 1963 or 64.
That's fantastic.
And I drive by this racetrack and I get excited every time I do it. I drive
Right.
inside and I start to shake. It's just,
Yeah.
you have to see this place and come here once, because once you do, you're hooked.
Yep. I don't think that people don't realize it doesn't translate on TV about how big it is.
Yeah.
People are always surprised at how big it is.
Yeah, I had a granddaughter that ran the mini marathon. She wanted to run because you run around the speedway.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
I picked her up. She said, "Good grief, is that place big?" I said, "I told you." Well, it's a lot
Right.
bigger than I thought.
Yeah. You can't see the other side. Right.
Oh, phenomenal. Well, I wish you luck. I hope the Simona will be around so I could talk to her again.
Absolutely. Well, she's be here. So we have our open test in April. We're going to be participating in the open test for Indycar, which is April 8th and 9th. And of course, month of May. She actually, unfortunately, has, we still say month of May, even though for the 500, it's like only 2 weeks now. And actually, she has a race in Europe the weekend of the Indy Grand Prix. Oh. So she is coming right after that. So she won't actually be here, the whole month of May. She'll be here, for all the 500 stuff only.
She's not running the Grand Prix?
Can't. So I will say because she is full-time Porsche, that of course is the priority, and that schedule was already set. So she actually has a race, I think, in Austria that weekend. If not Austria.
Poor kid.
Germany. I know. She's got to race her Porsche.
Isn't it amazing? She comes from a country where auto racing is illegal.
Yeah.
Very successful at it.
As soon as she crosses the border into Germany,
there she goes.
Yep.
Well, hopefully I can hook up with her somewhere when she comes around. We can do
it. For sure. That'd be great.
Hotel room or from a restaurant, it doesn't matter, anywhere.
Yeah, we'll be local. Well, we might have some space in Speedway itself, and then of course we've got the space at the track.
I'll try and do something with her, because I'm very pleased that you have brought her back. I think she's not only a nice young lady, but a heck of a good race driver.
Super talent. I honestly, I can't believe this is happening. The first time we saw, we had the team gear, and she had the photos taken. We have the photo of her in the snow. I don't know if you've seen it. It was like with the press release, it's her in the snow. And we did that on purpose because she's in Switzerland, and it's like, kind of a cool backdrop. But when that photo came in the first time, before the day or two before the press conference, and I saw it, because it's crazy that this team is my name, right? My last name. And unfortunately, both my parents have passed, but I keep thinking about what they would think, especially on the day of the press conference. IndyCar put the logo on the pylon at IMS.
I saw that.
So the fact that it's also my name, of course, that's that moment of like, oh my gosh, we're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and like, that's my name on the pylon. Like, you'd never think that. I'm a girl who grew up in Connecticut. I don't come from a racing family. Who would have thought that? But the other moment that really kind of took my breath away was when I first saw that photo of Simona in the team jacket, and just realizing that that's Simona Di Silvestro, and she is wearing a logo on her chest with my name. And I was like, how is this happening? So the both of us, probably couldn't stop smiling that entire week of the announcement when it was finally public, and we could share the news with everybody. So we're both very, very excited for the opportunity.
And I think it's safe to say that the only reason all of that happened is work.
Hard work.
Pressing on. And I'm sure along the way you had some no's, but that doesn't stop anybody. You just keep going. Until they tell you to go away, you just keep plugging.
You might have a million no's. You just need one yes.
Well, and you got it.
I did.
Well, that's great. And your connection with technical assistance from Team Penske, that's a pretty good way to go.
Pretty good way. I mean, if you're gonna have a technical partnership, especially at the 500, I mean, come on.
A team that's only won it, 18 times?
18 times.
They've probably figured out how it
what's so funny is I had a meeting with Roger back in 15 about Grace, and I said to him, I was like, I need a technical alliance. I said, I need help to help on setting up the car. And it was so funny. He's like we'll show you how to set up the car. Like, he says it so dismissively, and there's that moment where obviously I'm hearing it, and I was like, did he just say that? And then it's lovely to see that it's actually now happening.
Well, one thing that I understand can be said about Roger: his word is what he doesn't say if he doesn't mean it.
Correct. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to be polite about things like that. I mean, he's an absolute gentleman, but he doesn't have to say that,
Well,
unless he means it,
I
and
thought
he won't.
I thought it was funny when he announced that he was buying the track, and the question came up, "What about your team? Will you run the team?" He said, "No, no." He said, "I know where we are in pit lane, and I figured out how to get to victory circle. So that's all I need. I don't need to. I won't be on the pit wall anymore. I'll be
I
in the
know. And I bet you, I wonder how difficult that transition really had to be, right? And also the fact that when you see him now, his shirt is IndyCar, or it's an IndyCar shirt versus a Team Penske shirt. That's a big change.
I wonder if he gets to go to Penske hospitality, though. You think they?
I don't know. I do not know.
Well, listen, I've taken enough of your time. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for including me in this program. I really enjoy it.
When it popped up, I said, I know two people that might know something about this program. And I called Ruthie Culbertson, who, of course, led me to how to get a hold of your PR gal. I want to thank
Excellent.
Barbara Burns for helping me make this happen.
Yep, she's great.
Pat Caparelli, who's associated with Dodge.
Oh yeah, I worked with Pat when we were at FCA at the same time.
Yeah, and she highly recommended it. She said, yeah, if you can get Beth, get her. It'll be worth it. So
Oh, she's great.
had a little help, and I want to thank Barbara for making this happen. And
See,
unfortunately,
look at that. You just named 3 ladies in racing.
there you go. And I got huge response to her. I guess her reputation is A1, absolutely A1. I say, Barbara, but anything she tells you, she's great. So,
Absolutely. Yep. Her word is her bond as well.
well, tell her to be careful because I'm going to be hounding her to get you and Simona.
Simona.
We'll get you again. Well, thanks for your time. We wish you
Appreciate
nothing
it.
but success.
Thank
And
you,
unfortunately, you will see me knocking on your garage door if we can do that, that is.
I know, right? What's going to
Yeah.
happen?
I don't know.
Did you cover it this past year? Was it because there was a
No.
limited media, right?
No. Because being a senior citizen plus,
Oh, right.
they said, well,
Yeah. It's not worth it, honestly. I mean, especially, I know it's because it wasn't like the normal 500 anyway. So I don't know.
the
But
ideal,
hopefully this year.
the ideal thing for me would have been to get into the paddock or in the garage area because I wouldn't have to fight the crowds to get in and talk to somebody.
That's
But
true, right? Right.
I have had NBC Gold and I'm going to subscribe to Peacock, so I'll find out what's going on if they don't
Yeah,
like it.
absolutely.
I'll be around somewhere. But thanks for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Nothing but the best, and look forward to you on the starting field in the upcoming 500.
Thank you.
Thanks. My guest has been Beth Paretta. She is now owner of the Paretta Autosport team with driver Simona Di Silvestro. We're going to follow this one. This should be exciting to watch. Thanks for watching. We will be back. We've got other guests lined up to come on, and we'll be back to you as soon as we can. Until then, this is Don Kay saying thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.